Guitar intervals, C major, A minor, and related modes. This time looking at the B Locrian mode, focusing in on centering around measuring from the B note located on the bottom thin string of the guitar, fret number 7. This is part number 2. Remembering one of our major objectives is to situate all of our resources in the same direction, making them as easy on the eyes as possible from the perspective of the player of the guitar. Where is the player of the guitar located? Behind the guitar, hopefully, usually, most of the time. Therefore, for example, my guitar is going to look like I'm playing left-handed, but no, we just flipped it around to mirror your perspective from behind your guitar as though you were playing your guitar into a mirror, so you don't have to like flip my guitar around in your mind to try to get the same kind of thing that you would be doing on your guitar, because it'll be lined up in the same direction. Similarly, our Excel worksheet, which is mirroring or representing the fretboard, is going to have this as the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling, top to bottom, left to right, situated as though we just took our guitar and imprinted these strings on that screen. We're going to be continuing on with our B note on the bottom of the guitar, looking at the intervals around it, practicing the measuring of the intervals, in particular from the bottom of the guitar, which most people don't know how to do, and they try to rationalize that they don't need to do that. That's stupid. Why are you spending so much time doing that? But it's worthwhile to do. That's why it's worthwhile to do. And so that means that we're going to be in the Locrian mode, which once again, most people will be saying, why are you learning Locrian mode? Locrian mode's the crazy guy. You leave him in the corner of the bar. You keep your distance from him because he's crazy. But the Locrian has some applications. You have to communicate with the Locrian. You got to deal with the Locrian. So we're going to learn it, and we're going to see why, if I don't want to play in Locrian, we would still want to be possibly knowing Locrian, possibly seeing it as a modal chord. I want to talk a little bit more this time about extending our conversation about the idea of modal chords versus basically parallel constructions, making things that are inside of the key versus using chords that are using notes outside of the key but are still sounding good, not because I know the magic note that is outside the key that still sounds good, like a blues note or a major third and a minor third if I'm playing a blues construction, but because I'm thinking in terms of half steps or systematic construction, parallel construction. That's the rule that I kind of want to emphasize. Also want to emphasize the idea this time that it's possible for us to take what we know and then convert any of these modes to a related interval using or just changing one interval. So if I know the modes, if I know these notes, I can convert any of these notes to another scale by just changing one interval. And that is true even with the Locrian, although again, most people possibly don't know that because they haven't really thought about it too much on the Locrian because we kind of ignore it. And so let me go over that as we go as well. So remember, our general idea here is that we're trying to practice our intervals and trying to cram up as much information as we can. Before we get into that, I want to go into my intro in terms of why you would basically be doing this. I'm going to scroll back up top, remembering that our general idea is that we're going to take our major scale, not really matter that it's in the key of C on the guitar in particular, even more than on the piano because it's movable. The key of C, though, has a related A minor, which is quite nicely placed in the middle of the guitar, which is a key that many guitar players then learn quite well because of that. And you don't have any sharps and flats that gives us a nice kind of check figure. So that would be the idea. And then I want to compare all of the other modes to it. Now remember that most people play in the key of in the key of a major key and the key of a minor key, which in modal terms would be the Ionian is the major, and the sixth of the Ionian is the Aeolian or minor scale. So that's going to be the general idea. But even if I always play in those two scales, I still want to know the other modes, at least in terms of modal chord construction. And again, I don't think people talk about like this idea of a modal chord construction as much, because when we do a naming convention of a chord, we don't typically name it as the mode, a modal chord, because that naming convention won't work for every kind of chord that we can create. But it's quite useful if you're trying to think about playing something and trying to switch it up. Like if you know a song and the song is in the key of C and it goes from the 1 to the 4 to the 5, then how could you play with that song and do something new with it? Same kind of tune, but you're going to kind of do something different with it. Well, you could say, I'm going, when I go to the 4 and the 5, instead of just going to the 1, 3, 5, I'm going to add some of the others notes in the chord, or I'll noodle around the chord. I'll play the chord and then I'll do a little noodle pattern around it or something like that. And when I add them, I'm going to be adding the 7, 9, 11, and 13, basically. The 9, 11, and 13 being equivalent to the 2, 4, and 6. So then you're going to inevitably run into the problem of, well, do I add a major 7 or a minor 7? Do I add a major 9 or a minor 9, a major 11 or a minor 11, and so on and so forth as you do that, right? And so the main question comes up will be, well, the question is, do you want to stay in the key using all the same notes in the key, in which case you're doing a modal chord construction, I would call it, right? So if I went to the 4, from the 1 to the 4, I could call it a major, an F major, because the 1, 3, 5, the 3-note triad, will have the structure of a major third. But then let's go to the 5th, because the 5th is clear with the 7. If I did the G major, 1, 3, 5 would be the same. But then when I go to the F, we run into that problem of, do I want to stay in the same key, or do I want to be jumping to like an F major? So if I stay in the same key, if I have that mindset, then I'm doing what I would call a modal chord, right? I'm doing a Mixolydian modal chord related to the C major modes, right? Because in my mind, what I'm trying to do is structure everything around the C major as the key. That's the major key that everything else is compared to. So that means when I go to the Mixolydian, I'm going to say, it's the mode number 5 related to the major key of C, right? And then I make a modal chord from it, which means that from the perspective of this G, the F is going to be a half step back. It's going to be a flattened item. So I think that concept of trying to do a modal chord, building a modal chord, is useful. It gets messy though, because the perspective changes, right? Because when I play in the key of a Mixolydian key, now all the modes, this will be the 1 from a relative position. But if I name the modes with an absolute numbering system related to the major, then that helps me to basically get some perspective on where I'm measuring from. So I find that to be a useful thing. In other words, as I go through this, I'm going to start trying to practice this more, is that this shape right here, this whole shape, has all of the notes that are in C major and all of the other modes. I can name each of these notes as basically the start of the mode, right? So in other words, if I'm in the key of C, this C right here represents relative position 1 relative to the C scale. But if I was on the Dorian scale, then now that same C is now not relative position 1, but it's relative position 7. See how that's a problem? But from a modal standpoint, that C is still the first note in the Ionian. If I started from there, I would call it the Ionian mode, right? Which I can still call mode number 1 if I use an absolute numbering system. So if I was in Dorian, I can call that C relative position 7 to the Dorian compared to the 1 of a Dorian, but I can still call it from an absolute standpoint mode, the modal chord number 1, right? Modal chord number 1, or the Ionian mode. That's the first note in the Ionian. So if I built a chord it would be centered around this C right here to build what I would call some kind of Ionian modal chord, right? If I looked at the E here, the E's relative position to the major scale would be the third, right? And it would be the third. But if I go to the Dorian, that same E, because they're all the same notes, is now the second. But if it's the same note in my shape here, right? It's the same note here and here. So I can, if I look at it from an absolute standpoint, I could still call it, that's the start of the Phrygian. I don't care if I'm in the Dorian mode or if I'm in the major scale, that E within this shape is still going to construct a Phrygian modal chord if I was to build a chord around that E, right? So notice that this shape, I can start to label this shape in absolute terms by saying this is the start of each modal chord, and I would give a numbering system of the modal chords based on the relative positions of the major scale, because the major scale is the key that we typically compare everything to. So that's part of the project that I'm trying to get in my mind as a way to orientate myself, so you could do with that what you will. We're now looking at the Locrian. So in order for us to understand these modal constructions, then the question is, well, how do I do that, right? We could do that by learning the shape. We can do it by learning the intervals, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, and by learning the formula, whole, whole, half, whole, whole, and then the intervals, meaning the intervals around each shape. That's what we're doing now, the intervals. That helps with chord construction in particular. So how would we normally do it? Our story goes, you learn the major first because it's our normal key, and then the intervals of the major will be the same for the other major modes, which is going to be the relative 4 and 5, otherwise known as the Lydian and Mixolydian. So those two are going to have the same 1, 3, 5 relative to their root note, but will have a different one of these, 7, 9, 11, and 13. One of those will be different. Only one interval will be different from the major scale. And then I learned the minor scale because it's the second most popular scale and because the two other minor modes compare to it. So once I learn the minor scale, I can compare the two other minor modes, the Dorian and the Phrygian, to the main minor. They're going to have the same relative positions of the 1, 3, 5, meaning having a minor third, but are going to have one interval that's different between the 7, 9, and 11, and 13 from the Aeolian. So then I can compare that way. And then what about the Locrian? The Locrian is like a minor mode, but it has a flat second. So it's actually close to the Phrygian. So that's what I want to kind of think about. One thing I want to kind of think about before we go into this here on why that might be useful. So notice any of these notes here, any of these modes, then I can convert to another scale very easily, right? So the Ionian mode, for example, if I'm in the key of C, the Ionian is very closely related to the Lydian and Mixolydian. So what's the difference between the Ionian and the Lydian? The Lydian has a augmented fourth. So that means that if I was to go from this F right here, the shape would be exactly the same, but I'd look for the fourth related to the Lydian, and I can flatten the fourth, right? And what would that do? It would change the Lydian from an F Lydian to an F major. What if I wanted to, if I want to go from the C, if I want to make the C, the Ionian, into a Lydian, I would take the fourth, which is the F, and augment it, meaning move it up. So if I want to change the Ionian to a Lydian mode, and I know this shape, because my idea here is that I know this shape, right? And I don't want to learn a whole nother pattern as though it's totally different. I could do that, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to start playing in the Lydian. How do I do that? Well, I can identify the fourth, and I can augment it. I hope I have that right. I'm almost positive. You take the fourth, and then you push it up, right? If I push that up here, my shape will change from that of an Ionian or major scale to that of a C Lydian. And that should be something that you can kind of do if you're noodling around and you just change that one note. It's not so distinctive that the ear's going to go, wait, he did something wild. You can kind of sneakily go from one to the other and back and forth until the ear gets used to it in a way that's not jarring, right? And then what if I wanted to go from the Ionian to the Mixolydian? Well, the Mixolydian has a flat 7 in it instead of a major 7. So I can look for the 7 then, which is going to be right here, which was a B, and I can flatten it. So if I flatten the 7, then I can use this same shape, and now I can go to the C Mixolydian. So if I know this shape and I can center around this C or whatever C, I can then easily convert to the related modes, the Lydian and the Mixolydian, by identifying the interval, the one note that is different, and that allows me to go from a C Ionian or major to a C Lydian to a C Mixolydian. And all of those shouldn't be too jarring on the ear if you subtly go from one to the other, because you're just going to emphasize one interval that's different, allowing you a whole nother palette of possibilities after you go from one, right? Because if I go from the C to the Lydian, from the Ionian to the Lydian, now I've got a whole nother set of modes that are relative to the Lydian, and I can then change from the Lydian to something else, right? What if I was on the Dorian? If I was on the Dorian, it's going to be close. It's a minor mode, so it's close to the Aeolian. So the thing that's different on the Dorian is it has a 9-note away major 6. So what if I know this shape, which is the same as the C major or the A minor, and is the same as the Dorian, but I don't want to play in Dorian. I want to play in a minor scale. Well, then I could, instead of learning the whole other scale, I could say, well, I already know this. All I need to do is take the that B, the 6th of the Dorian, so I can locate that B and flatten it, right? If I flatten it, now I center around the D. Now I'd be switching from a D Dorian to a D, and it would be all the B's. There's not just one B, right? But you can go just switch that one interval from a D Dorian to a D minor. So what if I wanted to go? Now you can't really. Now if I wanted to go from the D Dorian to like a D Phrygian, then I'd have to change 2 intervals. That gets a little bit more wonky. But you can switch all of them with 1 interval, and that's pretty close. Like the Phrygian. The Phrygian is a minor mode which has a 1-note away minor 2nd. That's the only thing different from the Phrygian to the Aeolian, the minor scale. So if I know this same pattern, it's the same pattern we started with, C major, A minor, and it happens to be an E Phrygian. What if I want an E minor? I don't want to play Phrygian. I want to go to an E minor. Well, instead of learning the E minor shape, instead of taking this entire shape up to the E and trying to figure it out there and then expanding it, one way I can think about it is to say, well, all I have to do is take the 2nd, which is flattened, and unflatten it, make it a major 2nd. So I look for that F, and then I can push it up 1. And so if I take all of the F's and push it up 1, then I can go from a Phrygian, an E Phrygian, or any Phrygian, same concept applies, a Phrygian to a minor. What about the Lydian? The Lydian is a major mode, and it has that augmented 4th, which is here written as a 6-note away diminished 5th, but it's an augmented 4th, right? Because of my formula, same distance of 6 notes away. So what would I have to do? Well, if I'm on an F, if I know this same shape and I'm going from an F Lydian and I want to make it an F major, that would be the most close related mode to change one interval. I could just find that B right there, right? And I can say that B has been augmented, so I'm going to bring it back. And so I can look at the same shape and just change it, right? And then on the Mixolydian, a G Mixolydian. So this is the same shape. I have a same shape as the C major, A minor, which is the same as the G Mixolydian, but I want to play the G major. Well, how do I do that? Well, I know the Mixolydian has a 10-note away minor 7, so there's only one note I need to change. I can just take that 7, which is an F, right? And it has a minor 7, so I'm going to augment it. Did I go the right way here on this one? I say the Lydian, it was augmented, so we brought it back. And this one, the Mixolydian, is flattened, and we augment it. So I take all the Fs and I push it up one. What about the minor? The minor is only one step away from 2 modes, which is the Dorian and the Phrygian. So that means, so I could change the minor into either a Dorian or a Phrygian. How can I do that? Well, the Dorian has the 9th, which is a major 9. So that D, if I want to go from A minor to a D Dorian, I have the same shape that we started out with. But if I want to go to an A minor to an A Dorian, I should say I take the 4th, which is a D, and I need to push it out to because we flattened it. And if I wanted to go from an A minor to an A Phrygian, then I know that has a 2nd. The Phrygian has a flat 2nd, so I can just then take the 2nd and flatten it, taking all the B's and flatten it. And then here's the one that I wanted to say is the new one that I wanted to get to, the Locrian, that we ignore all the time. It seems like you have to change 2 things to get it to the minor, but it's actually closest to the Locrian. So because it has a minor 2nd and a flat 5. So it's really, the Locrian is the one that has a minor 2nd. So if I know this same shape and I'm saying, okay, I get to the B, I don't want to play in Locrian, how can I convert it to something else as easily as possible if I want to play in the key of B? Well, the B Phrygian would be the easiest thing to do, right? So here's how would I go to the E Phrygian? Well, the 5th here, all we do is take the 5th, which is that F, and see how that's that tensiony F, and we move it out here so that we have that F. So that would mean that the Locrian can easily be converted into this is a B Locrian could be converted into a B Phrygian scale, right? And once you're in the Phrygian scale, you can convert that into a minor scale by taking the 2nd and pushing it up. So these are just some ideas on how these modal constructions can help you, because that would be, you can noodle around and you can play songs that when they go from chord to chord, try to play a modal chord or some other chord in it. Now, the other thing I just wanted to point out is that when you're playing like a chord construction up and you get to this B, most people learned it on the top string, right? If I'm trying to play in the key of C, let's get that in our ear, and then you played like a G major, and then you play, the next one would be an A minor, which would be a bar chord, A minor, bar chord, and then you get to the B, you'd have to flatten that, right, to get to a B diminished. Oops, wait a second, let me do it this way. And then get into the major. But let me play it this way so I can see it with just 3 notes though. So like if you're going up to this C, I can play like this G right here. I'm just gonna play it this way with just these 3 notes. I'm going from that G, and then I'm gonna play the A minor. So if I go from this G with 3 notes, it's kind of inverted. Did I do that right here? And then the A minor. Wait a sec, what's happening? There it is. So I go from this G to this A minor that has these 3 notes. And then when I get to the B, notice what happens. The 5th is now above it, gets flattened if I want to stay in the same key. So if I'm on these 3 notes, it goes, and then the A minor, and then this one still has the minor. This shape is the minor shape, but I have to flatten the 5. and then the C. So you can see that last one kind of leads in there. Now you could, what if I don't want to flat this 5? What if I kept it like this, which means it would be just a minor, a B minor. You could possibly do that because the shape is the same as what was before, right? That means you're gonna have a parallel shape between the A minor and the B minor. Right, wait a sec. A. So that'll probably sound good. So let me just, if I went from I'm trying to get to this C. If I go from here, A minor, and then the B minor. So that doesn't sound bad to me, really. And the question comes up like, why? Why it should sound bad because it's out of key, right? But because it should be a diminished going into the C. But I don't think it sounds bad, to me at least. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here. But it's because you have a parallel construction, right? So when I go from this minor to that minor, it sounds uniform. It sounds symmetrical because I have these two shapes are the same shape. So I just want to emphasize the idea here is that when you get to that B, you could make it into a diminished chord, but if you play something parallel, then it's probably going to sound good, and because you have a parallel construction. So that's just something to keep in mind. You can also try to do the half step thing, right? So like if I'm going up to this G, this C, this is a C major, right? I could try to play like everything a major before it. Half step, half step, half step. So those are the ways to break the rules generally, right? So the general rule when I get to the Locrian, in other words, is do I want to play a Locrian modal chord, which will be a diminished chord, which will have a flat 5, which is going to sound very tensiony, but resolved nicely if I'm going to the C after that. But if I was in like the Dorian, for example, and I get to that B note, what you're going to end up with if you get to a modal chord, if I play like a modal Locrian, now it's not really leading to the C because I'm not playing in the key of C, I'm playing in the key of D Dorian. So it doesn't really help me to play that really tensiony note because I'm not resolving to the C. I'm trying to resolve to the D, right? So then the question is, when I get to that note, the question, as has been the case before, is, well, do I want to play a modal chord, which means I'd have to play a diminished chord, which would be a Locrian, or maybe I can try a parallel construction as I'm leading into the D. Maybe I just add the 5 that's a normal 5 and then lead into the D, right? Those are your options. Or maybe you do a half step through it so that when you're going in half steps, that's the other way you can kind of break the rule. So that's going to be the idea. So you might end up feeling like you got to break the rule possibly on that B so you don't get like that tensiony sound diminished chord. And those are just some ideas that you can do it. And then your mind goes, well, why does that work? Because now I'm playing something outside the key. Why might it work? It might work because you're using a parallel construction going from minor, minor, minor to a major, right? The 3 minors are parallel chord construction. They're constructed parallel, right? Similar. Or it might work because you're doing half step, half step, half step, walking up chromatically. Okay, so let's go down and do the Locrian. So the intervals for the Locrian are a 0 note away perfect first, a 1 note away minor second. That's the one that's different than not only the major scale, but also the main minor, which also has a 2 note away major second. So it's closer to the Locrian, as we said. It's got a 3 note away minor second, which would we would expect from like a minor mode. It's got a 5 note away perfect fourth, which is what we would expect from both the major and minor, but this is the really weird one. It's got that 6 note away diminished fifth. And then it's got an 8 note away minor 6, which is what we would expect in a minor, such as the Aeolian or main minor, and a 10 note away minor 7, which is what we would expect with a minor. All right, I'm going to get into the third is where we left off, but before that, let's do a quick joke. There's another political joke. Sorry about that. I'm on my political ranting soapbox here, so I'm kind of doing. It's kind of like a Greg Gutfeld intro. But it's not really because I can't do that. But that's kind of like, so it's kind of a half rant, half joke these days. So here we go. Here's my practice. You know, if you ask the average American, what are the top 5 topics you identify with the Democratic Party? I bet you like 3 out of 5 will be like 80-20 opinion topics, where like 80% of the country is on one side and like 20% is on the other. It's pretty clear in terms of where like the country stands. And I'm talking not just like the whole country, but even when you look at segments of the country. So it's not like it's a majority versus minority thing. Even when you look at different groups, they're like 80-20 opinion topics, and the Democrat keep pitching their flag on the 20% side like every time. And you, I mean, at some point you have to roll your eyes and ask, like the Doge thing. I mean, who's not for cutting government spending? Like, how, you know, they spend money like crazy, and it's like they're just wasting money, you know? Like how could, who, like, I mean, I could see if you're getting, but anyway, I don't get it. So, and anyway, this is, and you have to like roll your eyes and ask, I mean, is this really the valley the Democratic Party is ready to die on? Mainly because they were too stupid to find some high ground? You know, we often talk about choosing a hill to die on, because we presume that if you're gonna die on something, that you go to the high ground and then you try to defend that. But the fact is that oftentimes if you find high ground, you don't actually die. You go to the high ground to defend the high ground because it's easier to defend because it's the high ground. It totally works metaphorically too, you know? I mean, honestly, the Democrats should try it sometime. Try finding some high ground, for crying out loud. You know, since trying to shoot limp arrows fired by weak, ambiguous hippies out of the pits of hell doesn't seem to be going very well. That doesn't seem to be working. But hey, maybe if they replace the weak, ambiguous hippies with like Bernie Sanders, a 10,000-year-old communist, ready and waiting to plunge the economy back into the dark ages, that'll improve things. That seems to be their plan. Honestly, these crazy policies result in the Democratic Party. The whole Democratic Party is in the know. They're in the know. Know that is spelled N-O. They're in an entire sea of no's, an entire sea of N-O's, and they're still out there saying crazy stuff. It's weird, man. I don't get it. Find some high ground, for crying out loud. Find some high ground. Okay, so we're on the 3 note away minor third. This 3 representing the relative position in the Locrian scale. This 3 representing the distance from the root note, that being the B note in our case. Noting that the 3 note away minor third is what we would expect in a minor mode, such as the main minor, the Aeolian mode, the major modes having a 4 note away major third. The third also being the really flavor of the triad chord construction. It's an odd number, so we don't have to rename it for the chord construction, where we have a 1, 3, and the 5. All right, so if we're down on this string, this B at the bottom of the guitar, we're looking for 3 notes away. If I go on the same string, it would be up here to the D. So 1, 2, 3 notes away. We go boom, boom. 3 note away minor third. Okay, let's go above it. When I'm going above it, let's pull this one here. When I go above it, then I have to look at the inverse distance. So I'm looking for a 3 note away minor third. So if I'm going above it, I have to take 12 minus 3 for the inverse distance, which is going to be a 9 note away distance. So the inverse of a minor is a major. A 9-note away distance could be called a major 6. So there's a distance of 5 between the strings. There's no fault line between these two strings. We'll get to the fault line when I go to the next one. So it's going to be a distance of what I call -5 when I go above, and then I'm going towards 0 when I go this way. So -5, -4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Hold on, what did I do? I just picked up the B. What am I doing? I don't know. Wrong note, dude. We're going to go -5, -6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, let's count it up from here. So we're going to go -5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Boom. So from this D, if I measure from the top to the bottom, D to the B, that would be a 9-note away, which would be a major 6. If I go from the bottom to the top, therefore, measuring from the perspective of the B, it would be a 3-note away minor 3rd. Therefore, if I go up one string, the 3-note away minor 3rd will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets back unless I'm crossing the fault line, which would happen only on the B string. So if I was on this B, for example, and then I went up to this D, I would be here. Now let's look at this from the perspective of our root note. So if this is our root note, then this is the normal distance. If I'm here and I go above the fault line's between the B and the G, and I'm going to look from the perspective of the B, this tectonic plate shifted to the left, meaning it shifted away from the root note. So that means it's going to be a longer or larger difference. So that means that if I go up one string, the normal thing would be a 3-note away minor 3rd will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets back unless I cross the fault line, which only happens on the B string, in which case if I go up one string and cross the fault line, then due to the fault line shifting left, the 3-note away minor 3rd will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets back. Okay, let's go to the next one up. Let's go to this D right there. So now we're going to cross the fault line. We're looking for a 3-note away minor 3rd. We're going above it, so I have to look at the inverse distance, which is 12 minus 3, or 9. When I go straight above it, I get a distance of -5. This fault line is shifting to the left from my perspective down here. Therefore, I have to go diagonal this way in order to get a distance of 5. I like to count in 5s, not in 4s. That's why I'm shifting diagonal. And then, so that would be 10, and then back here to 9. So if I count it out from here, it's going to be 5. This shifted this way. It shifted to the left. Therefore, I have to go 10 back this way. And then I want to get to 9. 9 is going to be up here. So I was at -10, 9. Okay, so that means if I go from the B to the D, that from the perspective of the D would be a 9-note away major 6. But from the perspective of the B, bottom to top, it would be a 3-note away minor 3rd. Therefore, if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 3-note away minor 3rd will be on the same fret, but I wouldn't cross the fault line if I started above the G string on either the G or the D string. So if I was on this B, for example, I would be here. So the normal distance now is this one. That's what normally happens. From my perspective here, which is now the root note here, what happens, my perspective as I'm looking up, if I'm crossing the fault line, this fault line shifted left. So from my perspective of the root note, it made a lesser distance or put it on the same fret. So the general rule is from here, this is the general rule now. If I go up 2 strings, the 3-note away minor 3rd will be 1 fret forward unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the bottom 2 strings, the B and the E string, in which case if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 3-note away minor 3rd will be on the same fret. All right, let's go to the next one. This is the big one, the long distance one. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets forward if I go up 2 strings. So let's count it out. I'm looking for a 3-note away minor 3rd. Inverse distance, because I'm going above it, would be 12 minus 3 or 9. If I go right above it, that's going to be a distance of -5. And then because of this fault line shifts to the left, I have to go left to get to 10. And then 15 is straight up. There's only 12 notes in the musical alphabet. Therefore, 15 minus 12 is a -3. I'm going towards 0 if I go to the right. So -3, -2, -1, -0, or octave. I can go around the horn to 12, negative 12, negative 10, negative 9, negative 12, negative 11, negative 10, negative 9. Let's count it out on the guitar. So we're going to say I'm looking for a distance of negative 9, so it's going to be 5, and then we're going to say this shifted this way to the left, so 10 out this way, and then 15. 15 minus 12 is going to be negative 3. Going this way is going to bring us down to 0, so negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, negative 0, or octave. So there's another B. I can go around the horn to 12, 12, 11, 10, 9. So looking at this D to that B, from the perspective of the D, that would be a 9-note away major 6. From the perspective of the B, bottom to top, 3-note away minor 3rd. Therefore, if I go up 3 strings and cross the fault line, the 3-note away minor 3rd will be 5 frets forward. I would not cross the fault line if I started above the B string on this G, on this G string. So if I start from this B and I go up 1, 2, 3 strings, then it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frets forward, which is kind of just out of reach. So I'm going to say that this is the default, not crossing the fault line, even though 2 out of 3 times I could go up 3 strings, I would cross the fault line if I start on either the B or the E. So the general, so notice what happens here. It would be 6 frets away from the perspective of the root note, in this case the B. This fault line is shifting to the left, and therefore going across the fault line makes it a shorter distance of 5 frets up. So the general rule is if I go up 3 strings, the 3-note away minor 3rd would be 6 frets forward, which means it would also be 6 frets back, unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the bottom 2 strings, the B and the E string, in which case if I go up 2 strings, if I go up 3 strings and cross the fault line, the 3-note away minor 3rd, I hope I got that right, will be 5 frets forward. All right, let's go to the next one. Let's go here. So now we're going to go up 4 strings and cross the fault line. We're always going to cross the fault line if I go up 4 strings, because I can't go up 4 strings unless I think about going around the top of the guitar without crossing the fault line. So let's count it out. We're looking for a 3-note away minor 3rd. It has an inverse distance of 12 minus 3, or a distance of 9. Right above it, I'm going to call that negative 5. This fault line shifted to the left, so I'm going to go this way to get to negative 10. Negative 15. Negative 15 minus 12 is going to give me a negative 3, plus another 5 is going to be negative 8, and then negative 9. Let's count it out on the guitar. Negative 5, this shifts to the left, fault line shifts to the left, negative 10, negative 15. 15 minus 12 is negative 3, plus another 5 is going to be negative 8, and then negative 8 and 9. So if I go from the perspective of the D to the B, that would be a 9-note away major 6. From the perspective of the B, bottom to top, that would be a 3-note away minor 3rd. All right, so that means if I go up 4 strings, I'm always going to cross the fault line, and therefore the 3-note away minor 3rd will always be 2 frets back. Let's go up to the top string and finish it off. Now, if I'm on the top string, and even if I was on the second to top string, or even these top 3 strings, I would maybe, just from an ease standpoint, say if I'm on a B down here, I'm also on a B up here, right? And then if I'm measuring below the B, it would be easier for me to measure. So I'll do that in a second. If I'm on the bottom string in particular, though, I'm going to say, well, it's 3-note away is this way. 3-note away minor 3rd is right there. Therefore, it's also going to be the top string, that D. But let's count it up for practice's sake. So we're going to say this is going to be, I'm looking for a 3-note away minor 3rd. Inverse distance because I'm going above it. 12 minus 3 is 9. So here's negative 10. This fault line shifts to the left. I'm sorry, this is negative 5. This fault line shifts to the left, so I go diagonal to get to 10. Negative 15. 15 minus 12 is negative 3, plus another 5 is negative 8. And this is the only time I have to go from 8 plus another 5 to 13, because I don't normally go up 5 string all the way up to the top, right? And so then I'm going to take 13 minus 12. Only 12 notes in the musical alphabet is negative 1. And then 0, or 12, 12, 11, 10, 9. Let's count it out from the bottom just to do practice. This is going to be -5. This shifts to the left, -10, -15. 15 minus 12 is -3, plus another 5 is -8, plus another 5 is -13. 13 minus 12 is wait a sec. Yeah, 13 minus 12 is -1, and then 0 or 12, 12, 11, 10, 9. Whew. Okay, so if I go from this D to that B, from the perspective of the D, it's a 9-note away major 6. From the perspective of the B, bottom to top to the D, it would be a 3-note away minor 3rd. Now remember, any of these strings that are closest to the top, like these two in particular, I might say, okay, if I'm looking for a distance of a 3-note away minor 3rd, that B is equivalent to this B. It's in the same position. And if I'm measuring below it, I don't have to take a 3-note away minor 3rd. I can take I don't have to take the inverse. Instead of looking for a distance of 9, I can look for a distance of 3, which would just be, and when I go below it, it's going to be a distance of 5, 4, 3. So there's the 3-note away minor 3rd below it. Okay, let's do the next one. I'll try to go through the next one. Let's do a quick joke. This will be a quick one. This isn't political, I don't think. So this is just a random joke. You ever wonder how they came up with the word donut? You know, donut, because you would think a donut would be like a nut made out of dough, because it's a donut, kind of like a peanut is not really a nut. It's a pea, it's a pod thing, but it's kind of shaped like a nut, so they called it a peanut, right? Which isn't exactly, because it's not really fair because a peanut, but no, that's not what they do. In fact, the donut seems like the opposite shape of a nut, don't you think? A donut is like an inversed nut. Sometimes they sell the middle part of the donut, calling it the donut hole, which again is kind of weird because the donut hole actually looks like a donut. They should have named the donut holes donuts because they actually resemble nuts, and then the donuts should be donut holes, or possibly they should be donuts with holes, because they would be a big nut, but there's a hole in it. So it should be a dough nut with a hole. Or maybe the donut hole, I would think like the donut hole would be the dough nut. It's a nut made out of dough. And then like the thing that we call a donut with the center out of it should be called the donut shell. That's the donut shell versus the donut hole. I feel like, I mean, it's kind of confusing, you know, that like, I feel like we should correct this, because kids around the world are probably like, they're not even gonna know what a nut is. And we've been dealing with all this deconstructivist stuff where people are lying with language and stuff. We should take this opportunity to be more clear about, we need to make more clear words instead of confusing things. All right, let's go to the next one. We're looking for a 5-note away perfect fourth. Now, I keep on saying I want to do this and I keep forgetting, and that is to say, if I'm looking for the fourth of the Locrian, notice that I'm looking for a Phrygian, the start of the Phrygian modal chord, right? Because in the relative position, I would call that absolute mode number 3. So that means that if I'm looking at this position, this E right here is what you can call the start, if you were to center around it, of the E Phrygian modal chord, right? And so what we're really doing is I'm measuring from the B. And so if I think about this in terms of the modes, I'm measuring kind of from the Locrian mode, right? Or I'm measuring from absolute mode number 7 to absolute mode number 3. But from the perspective of the Locrian, I'm measuring from the first to the fourth. And again, I think that's actually quite useful. And all I'm doing when I say it's absolute mode number 7 to absolute mode number 3, the 7 is the relative position to the major scale. And so you might, and again, you might say, well, why would you want to measure to the major scale? Because the major scale is our key. It's our reference key. It's our Rosetta Stone. So I would, we can think about it. I'm trying to get in my mind to think about it two different ways, that I can name all of these notes as their related starts of the mode, so I can think about how to build a modal chord from it, which makes sense to have an absolute numbering system to number those modes, which makes sense to make the numbering system from the major scale, because the major scale is our key, right? So I can call this E, I can call it the fourth position in the Locrian modal chord or scale that I'm making here, but I can also call it absolute mode number 3, or Phrygian. It's the start of the Phrygian mode. So I'm going from the Locrian note, in other words, to the Phrygian note, or from the perspective of the major scale, from the 7 to the 3, right? Okay, any case, I'm not sure if that, I'm going to try to figure out how to work that into my practice so I can, because I'd like to understand it that way better. All right, in any case, and we're looking for a 5-note away perfect fourth. So the perfect fourth is the same on the majors and the minors. So it's the same on the C major and the main minor. It's a 5-note away perfect fourth. The perfect fifth, which we don't have in the Locrian, is a 7-note away. So we have a diminished fifth in the Locrian. So this 4 represents the relative position in the scale that we're in, Locrian. This 5 represents the distance from the root note, in our case, the B. Because it's the fourth, that means that it's an even number. So when I do the chords, I skip it, because we go 1, 3, 5, and then 7, right? And that puts us at the bottom. And then we have the 9, which is equivalent in essence to the 2, right? And then the 11, which is equivalent to the 4. So that means I'm looking here at the fourth, which is going to be a 5-note away perfect fourth, which we can also call a 5-note away perfect 11th. 11th. Okay. So so let's do this as we construct our Locrian modal chord, in essence, a Locrian modal chord. Okay. Anyway, so it's 5 notes away. So I could go 5 notes up this way on the same string. And so 5-note away perfect fourth or perfect 11th from this B. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's about the distance your fingers can reach if you have normal hands and you're not a monster-handed person, which is, it's good. If you're a monster-handed person, then you can reach further than that. But I'm talking most people, that's about as far as you can go. If I go above it, I'm looking for a 5-note away perfect fourth, which could also be called a perfect 11. And when I go above it, I have to look for the inverse distance. So 12 minus 5 is 7. So I'm going to say right above it, there's no fault line. So that's going to be -5. And then this way goes more negative 6, 7. So from this B, -5, 6, 7, if I measure that from the perspective of the E, top to bottom, that would be a 7-note away perfect fifth. From the B perspective, bottom to top, 5-note away perfect fourth. That means if I go up 1 string, the 5-note away perfect fourth will be 2 frets back unless I cross the fault line, which would only happen on the B string. So if I was on this B string, then it would be out here. So let's look, this would be the normal condition here where I don't cross the fault line. Here's my perspective. When I'm going up and I think about the fault line, it's shifting to the left. So if I look at this as my root, this fault line, this tectonic plate shifted to the left, which means it moved away from my root note, therefore making a larger distance. So that means that if I go up 1 string, the 5-note away perfect fourth is usually 2 frets back unless I cross the fault line, which only happens on the B string, in which case if I go up, 1 string, the 5-note away perfect fourth, which could also be called the perfect 11, will be 1, 2, 3 frets back. Okay, hopefully I got that right. Let's do it again. Let's go up 2 strings across the fault line. So I'm looking at a 5-note away perfect fourth, which could also be called a 5-note away perfect 11th. And we're crossing the fault lines now. So we have to take the inverse distance. 12 minus 5 is going to be a distance of 7. The inverse of a perfect fourth is a perfect fifth, which isn't in the Locrian mode, as we can see. Distance of 7. -5. This fault line is shifting to the left, that continent shifting to the left, so -5, -10 going this way, and then I go back towards positive this way, -10, -9, -8, -7. Boom. Shock. Alaka. So this is going to be -5, the fault line or the tectonic plate shifted that way, so -10, -10, -10, and then 9, 8, 7. Yeah. So if I go from the perspective of this E, wait a sec. Yeah. From the perspective of that E, it would be a 7 note away, perfect 5th. But from the perspective of the B, bottom to top, it would be a 5 note away, perfect 4th. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. Okay. So that means if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 5 note away perfect 4th will be 2 frets forward, but I wouldn't cross the fault line if I started on either the G string or the D string and went up 2 strings. So if I was on like this B string and I went up 2 strings, it would be out here. So this would be the normal condition now where I don't cross the fault line, which normally would be 3 frets forward. When I cross the fault line, then from the perspective of my root, this tectonic plate is shifting to the left, making it a lesser distance. So the normal distance would be, if I go up 2 strings, the 5 note away perfect 4th or perfect 11th will be 3 frets forward unless I cross the fault line, which would happen if I start on the bottom 2 strings, the B and the bottom E string, in which case if I go up 2 strings and cross the fault line, the 5 note away perfect 4th, which could also be the 5 note away perfect 11th, will only be 2 frets forward. All right, let's go up to the next one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. And, okay, so we're going to say, okay, so now I'm looking for the 5 note away perfect 4th or 5 note away perfect 11th. Inverse distance, 12 minus 5 is 7. If I go from here above it, that's going to be -5. This plate shifted to the left, so 10, then 15. 15 minus 12 is going to be -3. -3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's count it out from the B at the bottom, baby. So it's going to be -5, and then this shifted, tectonic plate shifted this way, -10, -15. 15 minus 12 is going to be -3, -3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So way out there. So that E, if I go from this E to the B, then from the perspective of the E, it would be a 7 note away perfect 5th. From the perspective of the B, bottom to top, it would be a 5 note away perfect 4th. So therefore, if I go up 3 strings and cross the fault line, the 5 note away perfect 4th or perfect 11 will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets back unless I cross the fault line, which would only happen if I started from the G string. So if I started at this B and went up, it would be here. So that would be the general rule, although I can only go up 3 strings if I start on 1 string out of the 3 and not cross the fault line. So if I'm here and this is the distance, and then I cross the fault line from the perspective of my root position, the tectonic plate up top shifted to the left, making the distance longer in this case. So if I started from here, the normal rule, if I go up 3 strings, the 5 note away perfect 4th or perfect 11th will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets back, 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 baby, unless I cross the fault line, which would happen on the bottom 2 strings as my starting point, the B of the bottom E string, in which case, if I go up 3 strings and cross the fault line, the 5 note away perfect 4th or perfect 11th will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets back, 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 baby. All right, let's go to the next one up. Otra vez, otra vez. So notice I'm pretty close to the top here. So if I'm looking for the 5 note away perfect 4th or perfect 11th, I might start from this B and say, well, look, this B is going to be the same as this B. And then I don't have to take the inverse distance of the 5 note away perfect 4th or 5 note away perfect 11th, but could just take a distance of 5, which means it'll be right below it because that's a distance of 5. But I'm going to count it up from the bottom here. So we're looking for the 5 note away perfect 4th, 5 note away perfect 11th. Inverse distance, because I'm going above it, 12 minus 5 is 7. Looking for a distance of 7. 5 going up here. This tectonic plate shifted to the left, so I go diagonal to 10, up to 15. 15 minus 12 is negative 3, plus another 5 is going to be negative 8, and then 7. Let's count it up from the bottom of the B. 5. This tectonic plate shifted that way, 10. 15. 15 minus 12 is going to be negative 3. Negative 3 plus another 5 is going to be 8. And then 8, 7. So if I go from that E to the B, that would be then, from the perspective of the E, 7 note away perfect 5th. From the perspective of the B, bottom to top, 5 note away perfect 4th. Okay? So that means if I go up 4 strings, I'll always cross the fault line, because I can't go up 4 strings and not cross the fault line. Therefore, the 5 note away perfect 4th, or 11, perfect 11, will be on the same fret. All right, let's go up to the top one. And once again, the top is going to be the same kind of concept here. If the B is there, the B's up top. And that means I'm possibly going to say, oh, if I'm looking for the 5 note away perfect 4th or 11, I'm just going to say, where would it be on this string? It'd be 5 strings up, and there would be the same up here. But let's count it up to the top for counting practice's sake. All right, so we're going to say we're looking for the 5 note away perfect 4th or perfect 11th. We have to take the inverse distance. 12 minus 5 is a distance of 7. Going right above it is going to be 5. This tectonic plate shifted to the left, therefore 10 diagonal. 15. 15 minus 12 is going to be negative 3, plus another 5 is going to be negative 8. This is the only time we have to add another 5, going to negative 15, because we're going the distance, the whole breadth of the fret board. So negative 13 minus 12 would bring us down to negative 1. This brings us back to 0. We can go around the horn to 12, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Woo! I felt like I did a rocket ship countdown or something. Okay, let's go up here. We're going to go, this is going to be negative 5. Tectonic plate shifted that way, negative 10, negative 15. 15 minus 12 is negative 3, plus another 5 is going to be negative 8, plus another 5 is negative 13. 13 minus 1 brings us to 0 or 12, negative 12, negative 11, negative 10, negative 9, hold on a second, negative 8. What happened? Que paso? This would be negative 12, negative 11, negative 10, negative 9, negative 8, negative 7. I think I skipped a number. I went to 10, I think. I skipped 11. But because I want to do the 10, 9, 8 countdown so bad. Bad. So if I go from the E to the B, that would be, from the perspective of the E, a 7 note away perfect 5th. From the perspective of the B, bottom to the top, 5 note away perfect 4th. All right. I put new strings on the guitar. It sounds so much better. I can't believe it.